What's up? Welcome to Backend Stuff. This is episode 4 in Elixir Basics. Today is all about strings. We will be learning about concatenation, interpolation, and using a ton of the built-in Elixir functions given to us in the string module. With that being said, let's jump right in and start writing some code. So command space, terminal. Let's get our terminal up, and I'm going to cd to the desktop. And let's create a new project. So mix new, all_strings is what I'll call it. All right, and then let's go ahead and cd into that project. Cd all strings. Awesome. And then I'll go ahead and pull up this project, open folder, and let me just drag it over here. All right. So like always, we have our skeleton project with the lib and the example module for us and the test folder. So we'll get to this in a little bit. Let's go ahead and pull up our terminal though. I forgot to make this bigger for us. Okay. So let's see. Strings. So strings are delimited by double quotes, and they're encoded in UTF-8. And a little side note for anyone running Windows, there's a chance your terminal does not use UTF-8 by default. So you need to change the encoding of your current session by running chcp space 65001 before we open the Elixir shell. But that's only for Windows, so you don't have to do this if you're on a Mac or Linux machine. And let's go ahead and open up our Elixir shell. So IEX space dash capital S space mix. And now we're in our Elixir shell. And when I say delimited by double quotes, I mean this. So if I do double quote, hi, double quote, enter, and it just spits back the same string that we wrote. And that is how Elixir knows it's a string. And strings can also be concatenated with the less than greater than operator. So we can do things like this. Double quotes, welcome to, double quotes, space, and then the delimiter, the operator is less than, greater than. And then we can just do another string. So double quotes, space, double quotes, and then the less than, greater than operator again, space, and then another string. So back end stuff and double quotes. So right here, we actually have 3 strings, right? We have our welcome to is a string, our space is a string, and backend stuff is a string. So when I hit enter, it's going to combine all 3 of those strings into one string. So that is what concatenation is. All right. And then interpolation uses the pound sign and opening and closing curly braces. The pound sign, the hashtag, and a little fun fact, the pound sign is actually called an octothorpe, and it was a made-up word invented by Bell Labs scientists. It was used to send instruction code to the telephone operating systems. And so thorpe means farm or field, and then octo is 8, so it literally means 8 fields. Fun fact, maybe we should start calling it an octothorpe. I don't know if I like it. I think hashtag might be my favorite name for the pound sign or the octothorpe. So with interpolation, the pound sign and then opening and closing curly braces, we can do things like this. So double quotes, we can do 6 times 7 equals space pound sign opening curly brace 6 times 7 closing curly brace, and then double quotes. So what's going on here is 6 times 7 here equals is actually a string, right? So those aren't integers. And then inside the interpolation syntax, we have 6 times 7, which are integers. So I'm going to hit enter to show you what happens. And it actually returns a string to us. So 6 times 7 equals 42. So it actually returns to us a string, but it gave us 42. So the 6 times 7 was actually evaluated inside of the interpolation syntax and then returned to us as a string. So any expression inside the interpolation is valid. And if a string is given, the string is interpolated as is. So like if we did something like this and we just put a string in here, it's just returning it as a string still. But if any other value is given, Elixir will attempt to convert it to a string. So we can do a lot of cool things. So like, for instance, Elixir can convert Booleans to strings. We can do things like this. Elixir can convert Booleans to strings, and we can do the interpolation and put true in here, and then closing quotes, right? And we hit enter, and we no longer see the interpolation syntax. We just see true as a string. And there's a couple other things. It can also do lists. So we can do things like this, and hashtag curly brace, and then a list is an array. And we can do things like lists for one value, and then the second value could be a comma, and then the third value could be 2 exclamation point. And then we can close out the list and the curly brace and the quotes. And now when we hit enter, it's actually going to just spit it all out as one string. So n lists 2, which this stuff can be pretty powerful, and it's really cool to see how easy it is to do it with Elixir. And then one thing we cannot do is we cannot interpolate a function. So we can't do something like this, but not a function. And then I can't do hashtag curly brace function x. So we can't do a function like that and hit enter. We get a protocol error. So it can't interpolate functions, but it can interpolate almost any value. All right, so moving on, some characters need to be escaped though to be put in a string. And a few examples would be new lines. So the \n or double quotes within a string, things like that. And then also the hashtag. So if we did things like this, if we wanted quotes inside, so we have a string, right? A, and then we want A in quotations. We need to put the \, in front of it, like that, in front of both characters, and then is and \, hashtag the first letter of the alphabet. And then if we did a new line, so \n and then quotation, this will be interpreted as a string now. So if we hit enter, and as you can see in the Elixir shell, it kind of just spit out exactly what I put in. If you want to actually see it as a readable format, we can do I, O dot puts, and then opening parentheses, and we can actually put the same thing inside this function. And now the output will look a little prettier to us. And now we'll see that A is in quotations. the pound sign shows up, and the \n actually put a new line in before we got our OK response. Now, if we were to do this without these, delimiters, or I'm sorry, escape key, we're going to get an error because it doesn't understand where we started and ended strings. So you need to have the escape key there so the compiler knows that it is part of the string. And there we go. Back to being awesome. All right. And one more thing before we start writing code. If you have a lot of lines, like a long string, multiple lines, you can use the triple double quote here doc syntax. And what that means is we just do 3 quotations in a row, and then you can hit enter because it hasn't done anything yet. And we can type multiple lines without adding the new line syntax. Okay, and then I'm going to just close it out, with 3 double quotes, and then there we go. The multiple lines, and then as you can see, everywhere I spaced, it actually added the new line syntax. So if we wanted this to actually look pretty, we'd have to do the io.puts in parentheses. I'll let you guys mess around and play with that because we have a lot to get covered in the next few sections. Now we're going to dive into the functions, the built-in functions Elixir gives us in the string module. And just to get started there, we're going to learn how to read docs. So I'm going to go ahead and open Firefox. And we are going to go to Elixir docs. And that is hex docs.pm/elixir/S string.html hashtag functions. And right here, we can see all of the functions that Elixir has for strings. So you can see string.at. And so at, you send in the value that you're interested in, and then the index that you want. And so everything starts at 0. So E is 0, L is 1, I is 2, and so on. So string at Elixir at index 0, it returns E for us. So that works exactly how you'd expect. And you can kind of just go through all of these and check out the built-in ones. And there's a few we're going to touch on today. And here's capitalized, so you can capitalize a string. There's a lot of cool ones. So please go through the docs, get comfortable reading this stuff, because the more you read it, the more you're going to feel more comfortable writing Elixir and understanding it. If you can't read docs and you only rely on tutorials and videos like this, you're not going to blossom into a beautiful developer that really knows what he's doing. And don't worry, no pressure. It takes time. It took me a long time to get comfortable reading through documentation and understanding it at the same time. So let's go into our project that we made. And we have this example project. So I'm going to just delete this the hello function. And we're going to write some of our own functions. One of the first functions we're going to write that will be some fun is we want to trim a string. And what trimming means, if there's any spaces, it removes them. So let's go ahead and just do def. We're creating a function. So def trim underscore string, and then we'll pass in a value, and then do, and then end is the end of our function. And inside here, we can do string, we call that module dot trim, and then we pass in our value. It's that easy. And now let's go into our Elixir shell and see what this thing does. All right, so we have to recompile our project. And now if we go ahead and do AllStrings.trim, if we pass in, so opening parentheses, double quotes, if we do something like hello, space, double quote, close parentheses, hit enter, it returns hello without the space. Sweet, right? All right. Really easy to do. Now let's say we want to not only trim a string, we also want to just get the first letter of a string. All right. So let's just say, let's rename this function first letter. All right. And then not only do we want to trim it, we want to get the first letter. And if you remember from the numbers episode, we talked about piping. And piping allows you to transform the same value down a line of functions without making a new variable and passing it into a function every time. So hit return, and then we're going to do bar greater than, and that's our pipe symbol. And then we want to do string dot first. And if you look here, let's first, if you command click, here we go. So string dot first, examples of string dot first. When you pass in Elixir, it returns E. When you pass in, I don't know what that is, it returns the first letter. So that's pretty cool. If you pass in an empty string, it returns nil. So with piping, so first takes one argument, but since it's in a pipe, it automatically is taking the value that is returned from trim and putting it into this function. So let's go ahead and save this and pull up our terminal. And we got to recompile the project. And now if we go ahead and do AllStrings dot first letter, opening parentheses, double quote, and let's see, I'm going to pass in Blork. Double quote, close parentheses, hit enter, and it returns B for us. Awesome. All right. Now, going down the list of things we can do, if you noticed, I sent in Blork, and the proper name to return, or a proper name is actually capitalized. So what if we wanted the first letter to be capitalized because we want to get the initials, right? So if we want the initial of a name, it needs to be capital. So let's create another function called def. We'll call this initial, and then the value that we're passing in, do, to open up the function, and end. All right, so if we wanted to get the initial, but have it capitalized, how should we do that? Well, we already have a function that gets us the first letter, but we want to capitalize it. So let's go ahead and do first letter, pass in value, close parentheses. Okay, all right, so that gets us the first letter. And now it's going to be the same as what we did in first letter. So bar greater than to pipe in, and then string dot capitalize. All right. And now we can just pass in the first letter, and then it'll capitalize it for us, right? So let's save it and go back to our terminal, recompile, and now AllStrings dot initial, and then open parentheses, double quotes, and we're going to send in Blork, double quotes, all lowercase, close parentheses, and then hit enter. And now the first initial is a capital B. That's pretty cool. So most people have last names, right? So initials need to have the first and last name letter. The cool news is we have these two functions that do exactly what we need to do, but we have to pass in the first and last name. So what would happen if we went back to our terminal, pulled this up, and we said Blork Erlang and hit enter? It only is returning B to us because it's taking the first letter of a string. So what if we wanted to basically allow one string to be passed in, but be able to split it apart at the space, right? And then we want to send each of those variables into the functions we already wrote to capitalize and grab the first letter. Let's go back into our project and write some code for this. All right, so let's make another function called def initials, open parentheses, full underscore name is going to be the argument passed in, and then do an end to close that function. All right, so a string can be easily converted into a list. You can split it apart at a certain pattern. So if there was commas in the string, you could split it apart at that. You can split it apart at spaces. You can split it apart at any character that you need to. So let's go ahead and see what that means. And when you split, so if we pull up string.split, I'm just going to split, all right? If we look at this, it divides a string into substrings, all right? And it groups, so it actually will return a list, as you can see here. That's what that means. All right, so let's go ahead and save a variable. Let's call this list equals string.split. And then if we pass in full name, by default, it's going to split it at the space, okay? And just to see what's going on here, let's go ahead and just return the list right now and go back into our terminal and recompile. And now all strings.initials, and then we're going to pass in Blork, let's keep it all lowercase, Blork space Erlang, double quotes, close parentheses, hit enter. All right, so now you can see that's pretty cool. It took one string and it split it at the spaces, and it gave us a list with two values in it. Okay, so now that we have a list with separated values, we can now map through that list, and map is basically just recursion. Since Elixir is immutable, you're not actually like doing a loop. You're calling a function over and over and transforming a value. We were not going to go too deep. We're not going to go deeper than that about recursion right now, because recursion is a subject in itself, and it's really cool and powerful, but we'll touch on it in later episodes. With that being said, we need to grab each individual value out of our list and pass it into our initial function, right? And then we'll get a letter back that's capitalized. All right, so how can we do that? How do you map through a list? So enum, also known as an enumerable, is basically it's any collection that implements the enumerable protocol, and lists are one of them. I'm going to show you how to map through a list with it. We'll dive more into enumerables in a later episode, but just know that lists implement the enumerable protocol, which allows us to use it with our list. And so if we go ahead and just do enum.map, open parentheses, and here you can see that we have to pass in a value, which is going to be our list. And then we can perform a function on that value. So we're passing in our list, okay? And then comma, we can do an internal function basically. So fn and then name, and I'll go through all this, and then dash greater than return, okay? And then when I returned it, we have the closing parentheses and an end here. And so what this is it's pretty much like a for loop from other languages. It's just behind the scenes, it's doing recursion. So what this enum.map does is it's going to go through every value in this list. So it's going to hit, we split our name, so it's Blork Erlang, right? It's mapping through this list, and that value that it's currently on is going to be this variable right here, name. So the first time through, it'll be Blork. The second time through, it'll be Erlang, okay? We have access now to each name individually, right? So what we're going to do is call our function initial, pass in our name. All right, so this is going to map through and pass in the 0 index, which is Blork, and then go through and pass in the second index, which is Erlang. Let's go ahead and save it. And now let's go to our terminal and see what we get. If we recompile this and call AllStrings Blork Erlang, we get a list, but we get a capital B and a capital E. So that's pretty cool. But that's not what we want. We want a string output, right? So if we take that value returns another list to us, and we can do a pipe. So bar greater than, and we can do list dot to, you guessed it, to string. So now we're going to create a string. So it's going to combine that list again to a singular string. Let's save it and go back into our terminal. Let's recompile, and now let's call that function again. Now we got BE. So we're getting closer, but our initials, I think we want maybe a space. Maybe we want a period space E period, right? Something a little more formal. Whoops. All right, so I think we can actually do that up in the initial where we capitalize it, right? So if we wanted to format this letter, remember when I showed you how to do interpolation for strings? We can do that with this piping. I'm just going to put it all on one line. So when you pipe one line or hidden, you usually just return it to make it more readable if you have a lot of functions being called. But we can do it in one line, and we can also go like this. So double quotation, hashtag, curly brace, and then we can go to the other side of this and do curly brace, closing quote, get rid of that second one, hit save. So now we actually can manipulate this or format it a little bit. So if we want a period after our letter, we can put it right there. And where you want a space, right? So we can also put a space there. Now go ahead and save it, and let's pull up our terminal again. All right, let's recompile, and let's call the AllStrings.initials Blork space Erlang again. And look at that. Now we have B dot space E dot, but look at that. We have this weird frickin' space, right? We don't want a space after the last name or the last letter. So how can we get rid of that? Remember, we trimmed this up here. So we can do something similar, but if we trimmed it at the initial level, it would trim off the space we're adding for the first initial. So maybe right here, after we convert our initials list back to a string, let's trim it again. So pipe greater than string dot trim. All right, let's save it, go back to our terminal, recompile, and let's call AllStrings.initials again, pass in Blork Erlang, and look at that. Now we don't have a weird space. Pretty cool. All right. Okay. So for this next piece, I kind of wasted way too much time on it, but I thought it was fun. You can copy and paste the function out of the solutions if you want it, or you can pause the video and make your own flying saucer. So I'm going to just copy and paste a function over and tab. And there we go. I have a private function called build saucer. And as you can see, I used the triple double quotes, so I didn't have to make a bunch of different strings. And there's our flying saucer. And if I just make it unprivate for now and save it, let's go back to our terminal and recompile. And if we call AllStrings, build saucer and hit enter, you can see that it doesn't display nice. And if you remember when we were talking about the io.puts, so like right now we're just seeing all the spaces that I had in there, and then we see the escape character n, which is new line. But when we just display a string in the shell, it doesn't look pretty like this. So if we go ahead, we'll make this private again because we're only calling it from within this file. But if we create another function called display saucer, so def display underscore saucer, opening, closing parentheses, do, and then end. So if we do capital I, capital O dot puts, and now call the build saucer function here. So build underscore saucer, open, close parentheses. Let's save this and go back into our terminal. And let's recompile. And now let's call the AllStrings.display saucer and hit enter. And there you go. We have Blork's flying saucer. How fun is that? I know, I wasted a lot more time than I should have drawing a saucer with string characters, but it's fun, right? So the challenge I have after doing this is what I want you guys to do is basically make another private function called customize spacecraft, opening parentheses, full name, do. And what I want you to do in this is I want you to take this string right here in the middle, all the asterisks, and in the middle, I want you to take the initials. So I want you to pass in a full name, and I want you to add the initials, apostrophe S, space spacecraft, all capital, in the middle of the UFO. So I think that'll be really cool. And then you're also going to want the display function, which isn't going to be private. And all you're doing here is def display customized. Oh, I spelled customized wrong here. Customized spacecraft. So display customized spacecraft. Pass in a full name. And then all you're doing here, I'm going to help you, is doing IO puts and then calling our customized spacecraft and passing in the full name. That's all you have to do. And so the reason I'm splitting these functions up is the IO.puts, you can't write a test for because, well, you can, but the response is just an atom, okay. So it's the colon, okay. So it won't actually test that, the spaces and everything is in the right spot. So breaking up the function allows us to test this function, but we're only looking for the response okay. But then we can also write a function on build saucer and make sure that the escape n and the new lines and the spaces are all in the spot we expect them. So with that being said, that's going to be the second part of your challenge, is writing tests like last week. And I'm not going to make any examples this time. If you need a refresher, you can look back at the end of episode 3, or check out the solutions on GitHub, but they'll all be there. So I want you to build I want you to test each of these functions. And anyways, so the display customized is just the IO puts, and then it calls your custom spacecraft. Now, a little hint here is you're going to want to look into String.replace with an arity 2. So the String.replace takes 2 arguments, and you can look into the hex docs to see how to use it. But I want you to kind of figure it out. I think it'll be cool. So with that being said, let me show you what the final challenge should look like. Ta-da! We got Blork's spacecraft with his initials on the side of it. So that's what I want you guys to do. So figure that out, and that is the challenge. And like always, the GitHub, the link is in the description, and you can see the solutions. And then so document these functions with the triple quotations, the @doc, write tests for them, and customize your spacecraft. Put your name down the side of it. And if you get stuck at any time, join my backend stuff Discord channel or check out the GitHub solutions. All right, guys, I want you to have fun with this. That's why we have an awesome freaking flying saucer in our shell. But till next time.